If I could go back to my early 20s, I absolutely would. I would be lying to you if I said I wouldn't. The truth is, I wasted most of my early 20s. At the time, I was a college kid. I was going to college classes like any other student, but I did not care about them at all. I don't think I cared about anything really. And on top of that, I felt truly frustrated by the life I was living at the time because it just felt so restrictive. At the same time, there were so many things that I wanted to do, but it felt like everything I did wasn't something that I wanted to do. In fact, I think the only thing I wanted at the time was that I wanted the day to end faster, but like every day. And so that was the life of college Anuj. But now that recently I've turned 26, I find that my life is having much more of an upward trajectory. And so I wanted to share some of the regrets that I have because I would go back and tweak a few things. With what I know now, I could have curated my life to be much more fulfilling, to be much more purposeful. I could have set those strong foundations for those 5 to 10 year plans that represent my dreams and goals, that represent my long-term success. I could have found and committed to a mission that I wanted to pursue for the rest of my life. And with all of that being said, I hope this video can give you some perspective, especially if you're in those early 20s or maybe even a little bit younger, to improve in that direction, or at the very least, not make the same mistakes that I did. If I had applied what I know now, I would have been in a much better place. I would go as far as to say that I would have been in a place better than where I'm at even now. And so without further ado, here are my 4 regrets. The first regret that I have is that I didn't dive into a variety of things, whether that was a party or whether that was some sort of interesting activity. I chose not to be as social as I could have been, and because of that, in general, it meant I didn't take any sort of initiative. There were actually quite a few niche things that I wanted to try out, but I would always somehow find a way to kill that curiosity. Inside all of that though, the worst part is that I missed the opportunity to meet people who I could have created amazing relationships with, people who could have taught me something new, people that could have changed my whole perspective on the life that I had at the time. I think one thing that a lot of people miss throughout college, which I completely did, is that parties are a great networking event, not just for friends, not just for girls, but also for peers and potential mentors. And even past that, if I had just thought practically, I was paying thousands of dollars in tuition, so why the hell would I not take advantage of college life? I really had a shallow view on the life that I was living at the time and all of the events that were happening in my life. So for example, since we've been talking about parties, parties are where people get drunk, parties are where people get stupid, or in my opinion, people are just stupid outright sometimes. And so while that could be true to some extent, I would let that define the whole event. And because of that, I just found the whole thing to be a facade. And then I would let that trickle into other things. That could be job interviews. That could be someone else's special occasion that I was invited to. It became contagious, but in a negative way. I remember back when I went to UCI, at the beginning of every year, they would have this club fair. That's where all the clubs, they would set up their tents and they would try to recruit people. And so as I was looking around, one of them really caught my attention, and that was the archery club. I don't know what it was, but I just thought it was so fucking cool. I met some of the people, they all seemed like really nice people. I even got their contact info, but every time a meeting would come up, I would somehow find an excuse. I could tell myself literally anything, and I could convince myself not to go. There's this quote that talks about how not even an ocean can sink a ship if it cannot get in, and in the very same way, negativity cannot affect you if you don't let it in. And I think that was the core of this regret. I would let negativity kill my curiosity, and that would lead to me restricting myself because I would not try all of those activities. I would not go out and meet the people who could have made my life that much more impactful. I found that an easy way to combat this is to simply just weigh the pros and cons. For example, the archery club. The cons: I would have to get up out of bed, I would have to walk across campus, and if I go, I might not enjoy the experience. And the pros are that you get to shoot a real bow and arrow, you get to potentially meet some really cool people, or maybe a really attractive, sweet archery girl. And 3, if you don't like the experience, you can leave and never come back. If you start to think like this, you'll find more often than not that you should just go at least that first time. So just get up and do it. My second regret is that I slept through pretty much everything. Classes, evenings where I had nothing to do, which were most evenings, and any other time slot that didn't require any real attention. I literally slept through college. I could fall asleep on command anywhere. That's how much of a fucking loser I was. The only things I stayed awake for were dance practices and playing Smash Bros with my roommates. Now, I've read and have been told before that because I slept so much, it might have been a sign of depression or some sort of deep sadness. And yeah, I'm gonna be real with you guys. It was definitely not that. The truth is, it came from a place of emptiness. I didn't know what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. I had no mission or purpose that I wanted to pursue. I did have dance, where I managed to join a world-class team. That's where I got a lot of life experience. I managed to really build my sense of self-awareness, but that still was only one small part of my life. It didn't compensate for the lack of direction in the other areas of my life. In terms of the financial aspect, my plan was graduate college, get a job out of college simply to survive, and then maybe on the side try to make something out of dance. And that was the extent of it. Here's something interesting to think about. Let's say that you're a character inside of a video game. Usually, that means that you'll have a bunch of different stats that you can increase to better your character. So what that means is that the higher your overall stats are, the better off and the more well-rounded your character will be throughout the rest of the game. Now, if we translate that to my life at the time, I was building one stat, which was a little bit of self-development. Maybe two, if you consider that shallow financial plan for the future. But because I wasn't working on those other aspects of my life, I was a person who had so many glaring weaknesses from so many different angles. That made it so much harder to progress or even fathom how I might handle the rest of the game that is my life. Fast forward to today, after a long process of deep introspection, of self-improvement, the things that have encompassed my vision back then are so much different from what they are now. Dance has sort of been put to rest. When I broke it down, I really didn't care about making a living with it. I didn't really care about becoming some sort of icon within the dance community. All I really cared about was becoming a master of my craft at the level of my peers, at the level of my inspirations. And with that mentality within the craft of dance itself, I was able to get pretty far, which looking back at, I'm really proud of. That led to me realizing that if I could become this exceptional of a dancer, how exceptional could I become at life? I finally was able to get that hyper competitiveness, that deep desire to excel at something, that ability to commit to a long-term mission, to translate into other areas of my life. The lesson that I learned from this one is really that you won't find purpose. You won't find something to commit to if you stay still. For me, that came in the form of constantly sleeping. As much as you can, especially if you feel empty like I did, you have to stay moving. You have to do something, because that is how you'll find the opportunities to explore, or at the very least, have some sort of passive improvement that will push you one step further towards something meaningful and one step away from wasting your life. This next one might seem a little bit shallow, but I think there's more to it than you might realize at first glance. I wish I maxed out my looks/physique. Now, there are a few aspects to this, but I think that maxing that out is a good representation of your day-to-day confidence. It's a good representation of your day-to-day discipline. Weirdly enough, I didn't truly realize that maxing out your looks, your physique, is something that's accessible to everyone. For instance, if I wanted to become some sort of big-time movie director or a decamillionaire, I could give it 110%, but I still might not accomplish that in this lifetime. However, when it comes to improving your physique, that is something that anyone can do and that anyone can succeed at. If you just put in the work at the gym, if you eat a little bit better, then there's no way over a long enough time that you don't have a better body. And those little wins that you have by conquering the gym on a consistent basis, on top of just outright looking better, is gonna raise your base level of confidence. If you want to have a bit more faith in yourself, maxing out your physique is where you should start, because confidence, deep and real confidence, the type that people can feel from you when you speak or take action, is built by competence. And you can't money your way into having a good physique. You have to earn it. And that's why the journey and the result of having a good physique is so important. I wish I would have known that so much earlier, because when you have that level of competence, when you have that trust in yourself, because you know you've held yourself accountable over a long period of time, backing your confidence then the way that you're going to impact the world around you, the way that you're going to look at yourself will drastically change for the better. Relative to my physique, I didn't have much of a wardrobe either. I didn't care about my style or my sense of fashion. Of course, I still had some pieces of clothing for specific occasions, but past that, it was whatever. I still don't think it's that important, but it is important enough to consider locking down at least a little bit. It's kind of funny though, because I went through this experience with dance. When you go onto stage and you go to perform, dressing well actually makes you feel that much better about yourself. I would say it even adds a little layer of confidence. But every single time that I didn't go onto stage dressed well, I came off of it feeling like absolute garbage. And it just showed me that to some degree, the aesthetic that you create for yourself leaves an impression on you almost as much as it does on others. Now, you've probably made the same excuses as I have when it comes to maxing out your looks or your physique. Something like, I don't really like going to the gym, or clothes shouldn't matter because people shouldn't be judging you based on your looks, or some garbage like that. So here's something I took from Jordan Peterson to combat those excuses.
That's the first thing that people do wrong. They say, well, I don't like to follow a schedule. It's like, well, what kind of schedule are you setting up? Well, I have to do this, then I have to do this, then I have to do this, you know, and then I just go play video games, because who wants to do all these things that I have to do? It's like, wrong. Set the damn schedule up so that you have the day you want.
In the same way that Jordan Peterson explains creating a schedule that you want, you can create the workout routine that you want. You can create the aesthetic that you would like to rock. A lot of the times, it's not the gym that you don't like, but specific aspects of it. For example, if you don't like lifting weights, then do CrossFit. If you don't like the trending fashion at the time, then emulate a look from one of your favorite celebrities at their peak. The whole point is that this concept can apply to so many other things in your life, so take advantage of it. The last regret that I have is that I wish I realized the power of the compound effect over time with the ideas I've mentioned so far. So Alex Hormozi, he's a $100 million CEO, talks about how he believes you can tell how wealthy a person is or will be by the time frames in which they operate from.
On the macros perspective, it's when people are talking about decades and not days, right? And so you can tell how wealthy someone is by their perspective on time in terms of how long they're willing to wait to see something through.
For the most part, he's referencing business growth and money, but the same concept can be applied to a lot of the things that I've mentioned. For example, if I had started working out even 6 months earlier and then just continued to do that for the next 5 years, how much better would my physique be? If I had just decided to try a lot more things a lot more earlier, how much more would I have learned and developed as a well-rounded person? Now that I can look back at my early 20s, I can truly feel the sunk cost of not starting my journey earlier, of not realizing the potential that I had around me at the time, and that's sort of translated over to where I'm at today. I've just recently turned 26, but I still feel like I'm playing a little bit of catch up with my life. Now, I have been trying to put my life together for the last 2 years or so, so I am starting to feel that beginning rollover of the compound effect. That upward trajectory is becoming more and more apparent in my day-to-day life. So if you want to drag your ideal future into the present, if you want to reach your highest potential at 27 instead of 37, you have to optimize for the compound effect. And the best way to do that is to have good habit building over an extremely long period of time. I forgot where I heard this, but if you can't rise to your standards, you will fall to your habits. So if that's the case, you might as well make your habits taper off at a place where you can't be anything less than the better versions of yourself. That was a lot. I hope I was able to offer you some perspective, especially as someone that's coming out of their early 20s. Feel free to subscribe because I'd love to have you, and do not forget, it is time to skyrocket.